Hi, so we are going to be talking about the self-efficacy theory by Maddie, Jillian, Jamie, Aaliyah, and I'm Emily. So self-efficacy theory is how a person's particular beliefs can lead to the execution of their plans. So many people are likely to participate in activities that they know that they would be good at rather than like branching out into new activities or things that they're less comfortable with. Self-efficacy plays a major role in how someone approaches a task or a goal or even challenges. It's also just the belief in their effectiveness in performing specific activities. So you might be asking yourself, how is self-efficacy different than motivation? And they're super similar, and they're rooted very deeply together. But they're two different constructs. So motivation is the desire to do something, while self-efficacy is the belief an individual has that they can achieve something.
Next, we'll be going over key terms related to the theory of self-efficacy. First, we have performance outcomes. These are positive or negative prior experiences that can influence the individual's ability to perceive if they can or cannot complete the given task. An example could be, let's say you are a student and you have an upcoming exam in a class, but based on your last exam scores, you did really well. And before you did really well in that test, you procrastinated your studying. For this next upcoming exam, you'll most likely procrastinate your studying again because you have a high self-efficacy in relation to procrastination. Vice versa, if you procrastinate your studying and do really poorly on an exam, the next time you take an exam, you'll more likely study more for it and not procrastinate due to the last exam you took and not getting good scores, and you'll have a lower sense of self-efficacy in relationship to procrastination. Next, we have vicarious experiences. This is when an individual can vicariously live through another's experience. Let's say if a stranger fails a task, the person watching them will either feel confident or unlikely to succeed in the same task. For example, if you are with a group of friends at a swimming pool, but you've never swam in the deep end before, and all of your other friends are having a blast swimming in the deep end, diving off the diving board, watching them go through that experience will most likely make you develop a stronger sense of higher self-efficacy in relationship to swimming in the deep end of a pool. Next, we have verbal persuasion and physiological feedback. Verbal persuasion is encouragement or discouragement from others, which will influence a person's self-efficacy either positively or negatively. Let's say you are playing a sport, maybe soccer, and you just scored a goal, and you can hear everyone on the sidelines cheering you on, saying, "Great job." And maybe most importantly, your coach is doing the same thing. The next time you step on a soccer field and during a game, your self-efficacy will be high in relation to scoring goals. Next, physiological feedback. Physiological feedback is when the body sends sensations throughout the body which are emotionally perceived by the individual, which again can either negatively or positively affect self-efficacy. Let's say you are giving a speech in front of an audience, but you've never spoken in front of so many people before. Your self-efficacy might be really low due to the fact of feeling butterflies in your stomach, which is a common sensation we feel when we're nervous or anxious about doing something for the first time in front of people.
So as you heard previously, there are 4 factors that determine self-efficacy, and you can see that in this diagram. The first one being performance outcomes, which is the most important factor in this theory. If you performed a similar task well in the past, then you are more likely to be confident that you can complete similar tasks in the future. Next is the vicarious experience, and you can develop self-efficacy by watching other people perform a task. The third is the verbal or social persuasion, which can increase or decrease your self-efficacy through encouragement or discouragement from your peers. And the last is physiological feedback, and that can either increase or decrease your self-efficacy depending on your own personal interpretation. So piggybacking off of Maddie's example about the butterflies, if you interpret it as being excited to go on stage and excited butterflies, then your self-efficacy would increase. But if you experience, or if you interpret it as anxiety or nerves, then that would decrease your self-efficacy. And so to recap, self-efficacy is the belief that you are capable of achieving a specific goal or achieving a particular result. And self-efficacy is task specific. So let's say your boss asks you to manage a simple project, then you might feel confident in your ability to complete that task. But if your boss asks you to cook a meal for Gordon Ramsay, then you probably won't feel confident at all. Self-efficacy isn't general. It's not about being good at your job in a broad sense, or believing that you are a good manager, or believing that you are intelligent. And those examples are general, which self-efficacy isn't. So take a look at the diagram, and it shows that the higher your self-efficacy, the higher you believe you are capable of achieving or completing a goal. Conversely, the lower your self-efficacy, the lower you believe you are capable of performing a task. And why is this important to motivation? Well, people are less likely to give a task their full effort if their self-efficacy is low for that task. And another way to think about this is, why would you bother to give a task your maximum effort if you don't think you could do it anyway?
Okay, so within this whole learning about self-efficacy, we came across these key empirical findings. The three main ones we found were task seeking, motivation, and social factors. So for task seeking, we examined a study by Safari and Ahmad in 2013 that basically took a cohort of students and split them in half, ranking them based on their perceived and ranked self-efficacy, and then gave them the same math test, and then kind of watched them fill it all out and everything. And they found that since as the math test went on, the problems became more and more complex, more challenging. They found that the group that had the higher ranked self-efficacy made more attempts on the difficult problems, regardless of whether or not they actually solved it or did it correctly. There was more confidence in the way they went about it. And when compared to the other cohort that had the lower self-efficacy score, those students didn't really ever attempt more difficult problems. And within the study, they came to the conclusion that when students have this higher sense of self-efficacy and the higher sense of drive, they are more comfortable taking these more challenging risks compared to their peers. And then this helps build confidence, and then makes it so that they're more comfortable accepting even more challenging things, and then just creates this positive feedback loop, which feeds into the second empirical finding, which is motivation. And as we discussed, motivation and self-efficacy are not synonymous, but there is this drive that does get formed within this study by Domenic Vettor et al. From 2017, their group found that people are going to have higher senses of self-efficacy if they've already experienced success within the tasks that they've been accomplishing. And they found that even though this skill is harder to develop with early setbacks, so if there are frequent failures, it does become a bit more difficult to reach this level of higher self-efficacy. It still is possible to get there, because they found that when people go through and they accomplish tasks that are more simple, but they're able to go through and visualize themselves doing it, put themselves into it, and then accomplish it successfully, they're able to then use that as a stepping stone to go to more challenging issues. And then from there, be able to build themselves up again. And then again, this relates back to the whole loop where once you achieve this little success, you have the confidence to be able to be comfortable moving on to the next level. And the third empirical finding was related to social factors. And this one is a bit interesting because, like we said, or I guess it's pretty obvious that self-efficacy is a very internal, self-focused type thing, but there are obviously lots of social factors that play into it. And so the main two socialization effects were discussed in Guevara et al.'s study in 2019. And some of this was already touched on earlier in the presentation, but the first behavior that was examined was modeling. So this occurred when they would have two students. One of them was completing a task and the other student was observing them. And then if the student that was doing the observation saw their peer successfully complete the task, the student that was observing them was able to more confidently complete the same task at the same level, and therefore have that self-efficacy to believe that they can actually accomplish what they're watching their peer do. And they did find that this really only works when the peers are at the same level of intelligence or perceived skill. And then the second socialization factor that was discussed was related to mentors. And this was what we discussed before, the verbal persuasion, where basically just words of encouragement and acts of encouragement from someone that is perceived to be kind of higher up. So in the study, they were discussing that it could be teachers, professors, parents, anyone like that. They found that words of encouragement for students and this verbal persuasion was able to kind of create this sense of improved self-efficacy. And then these students were able to actually complete these difficult tasks that they weren't able to do before.
All right, finishing off our presentation, I have some implications for practice that are related to self-efficacy. I came up with 3 in terms of academic, health, and career settings. In terms of academic, something that I have personally found to relate to self-efficacy is that the course exercise phys. So exercise physiology is a notoriously difficult class in the major. And in terms of where self-efficacy comes in, you can find different factors of it, such as vicarious experiences or verbal persuasion. So if I'm talking to another classmate or someone who has already taken the class and they're succeeding or they're giving me words of encouragement, and I already have previous knowledge of course content such as vocabulary, anatomy, and whatnot, I'm going to feel more driven to succeed and want to do well on tests and study and whatnot. And then next, in terms of health, I have an individual diagnosed with a chronic condition having confidence that they're going to get better if they follow a doctor's protocol. So for example, someone who has type 1 diabetes, which is a chronic condition, if they feel like not great when they don't follow the protocol to take insulin, to have a specific diet that is tailored to them, and then they do change their diet and lifestyle to feel better, they're going to want to continue to follow that and have self-efficacy to avoid feeling bad. And that may be an example of physiological feedback. It's also physical feedback, but there's a whole body like sensation when you experience chronic illness in terms of emotion and all of these factors. And then lastly, in terms of a career, there's a lot of different ways that you can experience self-efficacy in a career. We had a couple great examples already, but specifically, someone who is going into the field that they may have not had a job like this before, but they've had previous experience with tasks specific to the job. So for example, a teacher who just got out of school, they've been learning about all of these ways to interact with students, form lesson plans, go about their day scheduling and whatnot, even working with kids previously. They're going to have all of these experiences that they can bring together that is going to give them self-efficacy to succeed. And this may be an example of performance outcomes. So based on all these previous moments building up to now, they're going to feel driven to do well. Yeah. All right, thank you so much for listening to our presentation. References are pictured, and we hope you have a great evening.